A very good morning and warm welcome to all of you to this edition of ETAuto Tech Summit. And great to see a full house. So that shows the strong level of interest to understand from the industry leaders which way the industry is going to evolve, or rather, how the industry is going to evolve in many factors. And it's my pleasure to be the moderator for this panel discussion. Thank you once again. Gentlemen, really appreciate and grateful for sparing your time to be in this panel discussion. The theme of which is Mobility Tech Megatrends 2050. Well, the 2050 part is a little bit for the effect, actually, dramatic effect, because the way things are, it's quite difficult, I would guess, to predict what's going to happen maybe by 2030. But nonetheless, at least part of the reason for the 2050 is also that we will try and do some crystal ball gazing. Not me, of course, all the esteemed panelists here, because they come with very, very rich and varied experience, and not to say cumulatively, it'll go over 100 of years. So that's the objective here, to take stock of what's happening in the industry now and how the things are going to evolve in various factors, especially from the technology, on the technology front, and as I said, do a little bit of crystal ball gazing on to the towards 2050. Well, the automotive industry is nowadays also referred more often, increasingly rather, as mobility industry, and component manufacturers are kind of many of them are repositioning themselves as technology partners or technology suppliers, while OEMs, many OEMs would like to see themselves as mobility solution providers. So that's the scenario. That's also a reflection of the evolution of the automotive industry globally, and in India the story is no different, because of the scale and the way the Indian automotive industry is headed, and it's expected maybe in the next 4 to 5 years it could become the world's third largest passenger vehicle market. In two-wheelers, it's already is the numero uno. So without further ado, we would start this session, starting with initial remarks from each of our esteemed panelists on the overall theme of the session. And may I request Martin to go off first to share your initial remarks on what you think is going to be where the mobility megatrends stand as of now, and what could happen by 2050.
Thanks, Sumantra, and thanks for having me in this panel. Yeah, I think we all know that this massive transformation in the auto industry is ongoing. It's in full swing. In that sense, it's completely clear electrification will push the entire industry. We will push electrification. That's certainly the main and foremost mega trend. But if we go past that, then we obviously have also connectivity, connected vehicles for convenience, for safety purposes, to the customer benefit. So that's definitely a big one. When we are on digital, then of course we have to think also about automated driving or assisted driving functionalities, which globally are very much on the way forward, and I see that also over time happening in India. Yeah, and when we are on digital, I would not want to fail. I was also listening to the earlier discussion and about the disruption as well. It doesn't only happen on the product side, it also happens on the retail side. For example, a strong trend into e-commerce is for sure there. And I can also say I'm a firm believer, and as you may or may not know, also one of the ones who has implemented that with our Mercedes-Benz team here, a direct-to-customer sales model, the first one that was done here in India. So I'm a firm believer disruption happens not only in electrification and digitization, but it also happens on product, and it happens in the retail space as well, in order to deliver the best customer experience. So that is, for me at least, the core trends I'm seeing. Yeah, and I think we'll have more discussions around those or similar ones.
Thank you, Martin. So I'll get a Tion's perspective, and Mr. Jayant Davar, he leads a company which has technology as co-part of its name. So, Mr. Davar, your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Sumantra. You use the word crystal gazing. I go back, I think, about 5 or 6 years, and I read a report, and there was this guy who was crystal gazing in some sense. He says, you know what, I need to go to my office, I put an app on my phone, and by the time I am in front of my house, I have a car waiting for me. It's of course autonomous. It's one of the alternate powertrains, could be hydrogen, could be electric, could be anything, which again is sustaining by charging under the roads. There is technology that I can change the color of the car with the press of my app, so the door panels and everything changes. I enter the car and obviously it's already linked, so I can watch the entertainment or whatever I want to, listen to the music that I have, and it goes and brings me to my office, where I get off and somebody else comes and changes the color or whatever and continues. And in this whole paradigm, obviously now cars are going to be used 90% more than what normal cars are, because there is so much of user interface. So the world could typically do with 1/10 of the number of cars that there are. It would obviously mean that there would be no oil industry, so trillions would be lost there. There would be no jobs for drivers, so a lot of jobs would be lost there. The carbon footprint would fall dramatically. The import level on fossil fuels would be taken away. So all of this was something that was crystal gazing at that point of time. Today, all technologies are there. The limiting factor are perhaps all of us sitting here. Now, when does this go into effect? When does the automotive industry become a transportation industry, with people not only jumping out of their houses and sitting in cars, but perhaps sitting in pods and flying to their offices? It's a question of not how, if, it's a question of when. So the crystal gaze is all there. The automotive industry, transportation industry is all there. Whether it's 2050, 2040, 2030 is difficult for me to say. I think the gurus sitting here, whether it's Martin or him or all the people in this forum, are the ones who are going to make this alive and kicking. Of course, like I said, a lot of challenges, a lot of losses of jobs, but then the whole paradigm of this world would change.
Indeed, very well said, Mr. Davar. Perhaps, yes, actually, things are moving much faster than perhaps what we could also believe, maybe. No longer things are going to happen sequential, maybe, but they are happening dramatically. So let me get in another OEM perspective from Jyoti Malhotra. He is currently the managing director of Volvo Cars India, but I take the liberty to kind of request him to also be, to share perspective from the overall industry viewpoint, also because he has had rich experience and good stints in other OEMs, mainstream vehicle makers such as Mahindra & Mahindra and Honda cars. So, Jyoti, your initial thoughts?
Thank you, Sumantra, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you and with this panel. And I think since we are talking about the future of electric or the future of automotive industry by 2050, and it's all about, as we heard, about crystal gazing. So let me take this thought forward, what you just spoke about. So And I think it's, and as you rightly said, I think it is our imagination, our capabilities which will drive us there. But we need to start with imagining the future as to what it could be. And I think all the things we are talking about, alternative fuels or autonomous driving, are all in the realm of reality now. We are very much closer to what it is going to be. But if we imagine the future, I think just taking your thought forward, probably one thing is constant. As humans, the need for mobility will always be there. I think that is not going to go away. We will need to go from point A to point B, and it's not going to be about how fast we go from point A to point B, but how more convenient and sort of engaging it would be for us to move from point A to point B, and those solutions have to be found. And what is enabling this, I would say, is that a lot of things are changing. The alternative fuels are coming. We know electric is likely, but there are other things we spoke about earlier in the earlier panel, whether it is hydrogen or ethanol, anything is possible, how things develop. But electrification seems to be gaining much more momentum than others. But I think we can imagine a future where if someone is moving from point A to point B in an autonomous car, and I think we can imagine the city landscape changing. As you said, I think the cars will constantly be on move, because one, the cost of the technology will go down by that time. It would have become more democratized, and I think everybody will be using, let's say, whether it's electric or whatever. The other thing is, let's say if you're talking about electrification, today the concern is about we still end up using the grid power where the carbon neutrality doesn't happen. But maybe in future, the cost of, let's say, solar energy or alternative energy will also go down. And I imagine a future where cars will be constantly on move. We will not need a parking space, and all the parking spaces will be sort of converted into some different usage in the city landscape. And that will change how we design our future cities, and will also change how sort of as humans we live. And I think, as you said, I think that you will go from your home to your office, and the car is then available for somebody else. But cars are always on the move because the cost will be like very, very low. And that's how I see this happening. But I think important thing what Sumantra said, it is not just about the cars. There are different ways. When we talk about automotive industry, is much beyond car. There are two-wheelers, there are, I would say, last mile connectivity, three-wheelers. Even in some way, tractor is part of this. So let's say autonomous, I see, I think a lot of very easy adoptability of autonomous in tractors, for example, because of many other concerns which today cars may have, because they are plying on roads, whereas they ply on a field, but that may happen very, very, very fast. When it comes to electrification, we are seeing a lot of interest in two-wheelers already, and maybe because of cost concerns, but also because of despite all the anxieties which we speak about in electrification, but I think two-wheeler, I think the way we are looking around, if given a choice, customers are ready to buy only electric two-wheelers already. So I think this landscape will change for each of the components of auto industry in a very different way. And I think, but it's going to be very exciting, and that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. I think you touched upon an interesting aspect towards the end, which is while we talk about mobility technology megatrends, let's not kind of look at it very conventionally that only the the popular segments of, let's say, cars would be the breeding ground, but also, as Jyoti pointed out, farm equipment sector, for example, for example, let's say autonomous driving technology is already being implemented there, and because of the advantages those kind of applications, those kind of vehicles offer, being, for example, being operated in a controlled environment away from the roads, and therefore that will also not only help enhance their efficiency, but will also help develop and make the technology more mature, which can then be applied in road-going vehicles, for example. So I was talking about since in any discussion about technology, of course, the technology company becomes a very, very crucial part, and more so in the automotive industry now, or rather the mobility industry now, because I mean the automotive industry has always been a canvas for technologies, a landscape for technologies, but more so now it's becoming more technology intensive and also software driven, increasingly software driven, as recently the Tata Sons chairman also mentioned that cars are going to be software on wheels. So let's hear it from a Tata Group representative, Mr. Lalit Arora, who is the India head of Connected Automotive Solutions at Tata Communications, which, if I'm not wrong, has about 30% of the world's internet technology capacity.
You're right. So we are connecting the world, enterprise connectivity, 30% of world internet is on us.
Your initial thoughts on the overall theme?
Definitely. Thanks Sumantra and ET team. It's a pleasure to be connecting with all of you. When I first heard about the topic Megatrends 2050, I just felt I am flying in the car. We said it will happen today, tomorrow, 2050, 2040 is to be seen. And if you look at the key trends today, the case, it's given, it's there, it's already there. It's how we implement, how we implement it in the real world scenario will be the key. But let's take a step back. Why did case came into existence? If you look at our population today, we are 7.8 billion in the world. By 2050, we'll be 10 billion people. It's like adding India plus China in the ecosystem. So when you talk about mobility, that adding 2.5 billion people in the world will have to, and those people will move. Well, what does it take? I mean, it will have serious constraints on the ecosystem where sustainability becomes a key factor. Will personal cars be very important? Will people be able to afford that? It's still to be seen. Maybe there is a case where the personal cars become so expensive that one has to use public transport. We don't know today. Second key aspect is to move such a big population. Public transport will be a key factor because investing in infrastructure, there is a limit to investing in infrastructure and keeping it at pace with the growing population. So that will be another key factor. Now, when we look at adoption of technology, need is where the technology definitely solves its purpose. If there is no need, no technology you bring in, it will never find a place. When we talk about technology in automotive, the needs are convenience, safety, which we all are aware of. But if you look at one more important factor, which WHO brings in by 2050, we'll have around 2 billion people who will be above age 60 in the world. So how would they move? What will be the technology doing to make their life easy will also be a very important factor which we need to look at when we develop and improvise on technology. Will there be new technologies coming in beyond case? Is still to be seen. There are many experimentations going on, and definitely it's a time when we see them in actual action. From Tatacom perspective, see, we cut across case overall. We connect the world. 30% of world's internet is on us, and connectivity, which is providing the base backend and connectivity, is the key for any technology implementation. You take electric vehicles, you take autonomous vehicles. There'll be a lot of data which these vehicles will generate, and that data has to go. And there has to be analytics so that the customization and improvisations on the technology can happen. So there we play today, and we are doing our bit to make it more sustainable.
Indeed, that's the key word which you ended your initial remark with, sustainability. And everything, I think all actions across OEMs and across all operations of OEMs, I think sustainability is a key driving factor in anything that is being done at the organization level or at the market level or at the industry level. So, ladies and gentlemen, please do keep your questions ready for the esteemed panelists, because not often that we have an opportunity to have such a lineup of speakers to kind of get our queries addressed. So let me, that will come very soon to that section of the session. But let me first ask a question to Martin. Now, Martin, the luxury vehicle industry globally is the breeding ground for new technologies. And specifically for Mercedes also, you have started rolling out connected vehicles, I think about towards the end of 2019 or so. And also, if you talk about the C and A of case, which is connected vehicles and autonomous. And autonomous, I believe, with the new Maybach S-Class, you are offering an L2 level. So how has been the adoption and success rate? What are the learnings that you have, Mercedes-Benz has gathered here? And going forward, how do you see it evolving?
Yeah, of course. I mean, as Mercedes-Benz, we are a luxury brand, and luxury today is not only, say, being comfortably sitting in a car and drive, or being driven, or being sporty. It's a lot about personalization on the one hand, and a lot about, say, latest technology that goes across all features, from connected vehicles to autonomous offerings. In that sense, it's extremely important for us to move forward in these areas. Of course, electrification is another element which pays into the sustainability topic. But when we talk about high tech, it's the full field, from electric cars to connected cars to autonomous driving. What I can say as Mercedes-Benz, we have not only, say, the aspirations, but we have also high delivery in that. And if you ask me about the Indian experience, we use a lot our R&D centers in Bangalore. We have around 6,000 plus engineers who work on digital solutions. They work on our connectivity, on our MBUX user interfaces. They work onto the future operating system, which is called MBOS, to be introduced in 2 years into the vehicles, which will then not only steer infotainment and some sort of artificial intelligences, but also vehicle functionality, powertrain, drivetrain optimizations, and so forth. So there's a lot of work that happens here in India for the global picture. In that sense, our experience is twofold. On the one hand, we bring to the market in India via Mercedes-Benz India. On the other hand, we drive the new technologies for the global market out of our R&D centers here in Bangalore mostly, also some in Pune, to support the global development of luxury in the field of, say, sustainable technology, which we want to provide.
Yes. Any discussion around technology megatrends has to include electric vehicles, of course. And you have made the first move in the luxury space with the EQC, and with the EQS, which is coming up next, and you showcased the concept, EQX concept. So what are the kind of insights that you have got in terms of the appetite or the adoption rate of the EV technology in India in that space, and how will it, what can be expected from the EQS?
Yeah, I think the electrification is, in my view, coming very strongly also in India. I'm in India now a little bit over 3.5 years, and at the beginning when I joined Mercedes-Benz here in India, I asked a few journalists, because I assumed they know the market very well, and I asked them, what's your view in electric? The statement was basically, don't bother. Very renowned journalists. If I open now their publications, physically or virtually, I think that don't bother isn't true anymore. I see a lot of products being offered. I see at the same time customer demand coming up. We have more and more questions around what do you offer, and I know that's also a trend in the industry. There's policy changes which have significantly supported also in the passenger car industry to promote electric vehicles. So I think, of course, there is still some inhibitors like infrastructure. Vikram was also talking about, but overall, I think the trend is completely clear. We'll see a trend to electrification. I personally still believe it will take some time for adoption. You will all know that I mean, I just recently asked my driver after these electric two-wheelers are coming out, and I asked him, what's your view on would you get one? He says, yeah, looks interesting, but maybe price, and let me see I know this guy, he's about to buy one, and let me see. So I think that is something which we will see across the industry. We have this a little bit, offering is there. We'll have first customers who go into that, and it will take a little bit of time that it's actually then coming through. So you know your friend, your neighbor has also now a car, he is happy, he is that. So I think we get an acceleration in the adoption of electric vehicles in India. So whilst we have a lot of interest initial interest also for our EQ products, and we have also customers who really want cars, and we have been quite successfully selling our first models, I still think it needs a little bit of this learning together how it works, and that it can be useful. In that sense, I think we have had a good start. The framework is good. The product offerings are coming. The demand is there, and I'm quite hopeful we will see coming from maybe 1 or 2% to say 10, 15, 20% in the next, or even 25% in the next 4 or 5 years, in at least in our segment of the industry.
Okay, yes, indeed. I think given the appetite or the tendency to embrace technology by Indian consumers, I'm not talking only about cars, let's say the mobile phones, for example, if that's an indication, I think the growth is going to be exponential. And since when you talked about the driver, recently I came across a person who is a gardener by profession, and he was using a new electric scooter. So I just curious, I said, no, what's the reason? You know what? The prices are shooting up the roof, fuel prices, the fossil fuel prices, and he shifted from a fossil fuel vehicle to an electric scooter. And so that's the kind of awareness and adoption. And as I said, 1 to 2% to about 20 to 25% may not be impossible, which may have been difficult to believe a few years earlier, but the way it is going, I think it is going to see some exponential growth. Jyoti, your viewpoint in terms of the technology adoption or technology evolution, could it also be that in some cases there could be the other way around, from the mainstream towards premium luxury segments?
Yeah, I think with respect to a transfer of technology and democratization, that will happen. Electrification, for example, what we just heard, and I said it earlier also, let us say, take an example that over a period of time, very, very soon, every teenager who aspires to buy a two-wheeler will start buying a EV two-wheeler, let's say. That's a start. And that's happening. I think we see it around. I think we have, as a country, we have moved away from a stage where everybody was curious to now people are putting money on table to buy. It's happening, right? So, but how that will translate into adoption in other industries upstream, for example. So in my household, if let's say my daughter or my son or my nephew, someone buys an electric two-wheeler, I will see him or her using an EV in a seamless way, getting it charged, although it comes with, let's say, 100, maybe 80, 100, 150 kilometers range. But I'm sure in India we will find solutions for, teenagers will find a solution. And that will suddenly make me realize, oh, okay, I think even I can buy a car, right? So I think that is likely to trigger adoption from one type of usage to the other type of usage. So that is bound to happen. And I have seen it in a very small way already. So that is, I think, one way. The other thing is, I think this industry with the entry barriers that we had in auto industry, whether it was a two-wheeler or whether it was a car or whether it was anything, was largely technological, which was largely mechanical, right? And that barrier is now sort of, in a way, slowly going away, and it is becoming, as we heard, more software. Operating softwares are coming. Our mobility vehicles, whether they're two-wheelers, three-wheelers, cars, are going to become more and more like smart devices. Like today we have smartphones, probably they will become smart devices which will have many more capabilities than what is it today. So I think the transfer of technology will happen both ways. Some of the new technologies, innovations which are probably happening in luxury industry, where there is a possibility of charging premium, probably will still keep coming from there. And as they get more democratized, they will go downstream. And the vice versa will also happen. But that is not about the cars. I think what is also happening with the consumers, with I think lot of things happening around us, when we talk about digitalization, so there is augmented reality we are talking about, there is metaverse we are talking about, there is 5G which is coming. So I think what will change is not just the vehicle itself, but the whole ecosystem around it, how we market our cars.
Right.
Maybe metaverse is the new way, God knows, or how we approach our customers will change. And those innovations probably will come up from not probably traditional players, that may come from somebody else and then get adopted across the value chain.
Right.
So that's
and
happening.
get democratized.
And I think this will keep on, I think this will become more and more integrated as we move forward. That's how I see.
Indeed, indeed. Mr. Davar, in this very disruptive era, it's all about, it's more, the industry is more technology intensive than ever before. Innovation is becoming the name of the game. So is collaboration. And therefore, the role of a tier one, the relationship between a tier one and OEMs is also evolving. And in many cases, in some cases, the tier one is taking the lead, especially when it comes to certain technologies and features, like especially on the software side and things like that. Given this scenario, do you think it also opens up a new dimension of opportunities for Indian tier ones? I mean, for example, from what I understand, Sandhar Technologies, you have made quite multiple inorganic moves over the last few years to, in a bid to kind of tap these opportunities. Could you throw some light on more on what are the kind of opportunities does the current scenario provide for Indian companies?
Well, I haven't been in the industry as long as Vikram has. He said 40 years. I'm more like the 30-year kinds. And when we got into the industry, which was probably early 90s, late 80s, I remember our industry as component suppliers used to be print to manufacture. So whether it was a Toyota or a Honda or a Suzuki or whatever, we got drawings. And we were also, in fact, we built relationships due to the OEMs with their Keiretsu partners in Japan or in here, there, and everywhere. That was the limitation to what we were supposed to do. Come now, and we in ACMA, for example, have changed the definition of auto component memberships, which means they're no longer only commodity players or proprietary part players. We've now added software people into, who supply software, who supply telematics, who even go up to the extent of logistics suppliers for the new kind of movement that has started to happen. So that tells you how the entire paradigm of partners in this industry as supplier partners, that definition itself has gone up. I also remember, I think this was 20 years ago, I was leading a delegation to China, and we went to a place called Chongqing, which is one of the largest cities in China. Not many people know about this, but in terms of population, it's huge. And we went into one of these two-wheeler marketplaces. And there were these small, small shops. And you could walk into a shop and you could tell them, well, I want that frame, I want that seat, I want that tire, I want that fuel tank. And he would assemble it in front of you, like a lot of people do cycles here in India. And on top of that, he would also give you the option. What sticker do you want on it? Do you want a Honda or a Suzuki? Of course, they were misspelled, but you could put that. Going into the future, especially when we talk about electric vehicles and so on and so forth, these are going to be much more modular. Like many people have been saying, the number of parts drops significantly. So on paper, it is possible for me to be able to pick the parts that I want and assemble it at home, like an IKEA product. Whether that is going to happen or not on account of regulations, on account of this, that, and the other is different. But I'm saying the game now is open for each component manufacturer to introspect and figure out whether there is relevance to what he does today. A lot of people, let's say in the sphere of engines, pistons, and so on and so forth, may cease to exist. I'm not saying they are. Of course, the jury is still out as to what population or what percentage of vehicles will be this, that, and the other. But I think each one is at that point in time where our introspection is much more. And yet, like you said, there are lots of opportunities. Going back 10 or 12 years, I think we as a company have signed almost 12, 13 joint ventures because we believe collaboration is the way forward into electronification, into new mandatory regulation, into comfort of vehicles and so on and so forth. These were new for the country. We would only make parts, and now we make these modules and these complete things. So things are changing. There is opportunity, but like I said, a lot of danger and challenges ahead too.
And so the industry players will have to navigate through these challenges as well. Lalit, I was just like earlier, in computer there would be sticker or patch called Intel Inside, and now there is internet technology, and that's being used also as a marketing tool by OEMs. So in terms of that trend, how do you see it evolving? Internet technology in the cars, and also the overall software penetration, software technology penetration in cars, especially in the Indian context.
Okay. So, Sumit, I'll take it like that. So if you look at, I break the things into 4 layers. Base layer is the component manufacturing, where it includes players who are providing software. Then there is a vehicle, where it is assembly and all components are assembled. Above that, there is a network layer, where how the vehicles will connect to the infrastructure will be the key, how that layer is managed. And the 4th layer is the cloud layer, where there will be collaboration. There are multi-players today, and they will play their part in terms of bringing commonization or standardization in each layer. I mean, even if you look at the component or the software, when we call, there are in each ECU manufacturing, there are standardized practices which are coming up. I mean, to name a few, AutoSAR for ECU, and in infotainment, they are there. So when you look at each layer, right, barring the vehicle, which will definitely be there, and what form factor things will evolve. But in each layer, beyond, below, and above the vehicle, there will be standardization, there will be multi-players who are coming, and there will be there will be a lot of collaboration in each layer, and how because industry will like to go fast in each vertical, and for that collaboration is needed because technology is evolving and it will continue to evolve to solve the needs and challenges which people are facing, and that's where I see it is trending.
Okay, at this stage, I would also invite questions from the audience, if there are any, which I'm sure some of you will have. So whoever has a question, kindly raise your hand so that our microphone can reach you, and you can please introduce yourself and ask your question, and also mention who you would like it to be addressed by. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Zareen. I'm part of Yes Bank's EV Advisory Division. My question is to Mr. Davar. You talked about how the whole auto component landscape is evolving. And we talked a lot about the entry of non-traditional players on the OEM side and the impact on how we need to keep up with technologies. How do you believe the existing auto component players should take this challenge up ahead? Do you think that a more future-forward strategy, or is the order of the day, considering the OEM landscape is also evolving, where we talk about products first and take them to the market? And do you believe that on the OEM side, is there a change in the way they're looking at make versus buy? And yeah.
Oh, there's a huge change, massive change. I remember, again, I think it was 6 years ago when we were the first company out of India to supply to a Tesla. And this was a first for us. We kind of advertised their names along with us as our customer. And a suit was thrown at us. We had to go to court because somewhere in the fine print, it was written that we were not allowed to say that we were suppliers to a certain OEM. That was new for us. You know, all our lives we'd been supplying to every OEM, and we were proud partners. In fact, whether it was a Mercedes or a Volvo or a Toyota or a Honda, whoever there is, used to acknowledge us as partners. These guys said, no way. So the dealing of a partnership that used to be there had a different phrase for us. Now, of course, that has nothing to do with buying or selling. I'm just talking to you as to how the paradigms are shifting. Today, the market is open. India is as much as in the front or at the back where these new technologies are concerned. Today, it's impossible for me to find collaborators or technology suppliers anywhere in the world because they themselves are at the same stage as we are. All of a sudden now, the component industry is looking at startups. We, for example, are looking at almost 10 or 11 startups that we've signed joint ventures with in the country to look at telematics, to look at electrical controllers, to do this and the other. And that's the reason I said it is quite possible that the entire industry will become so modular. When we used to buy machines, there used to be, which controller is being used. And they would say, well, it's a Fanuc controller. It didn't matter what machine it was. If it was a Fanuc controller, that meant that there was more bass in that particular machine. It was solid. Similarly, I think going forward, our component group or peers would be giving modules, and you'd be able to say, well, you know what? This is the module that it carries. And if it does carry that, that's an endorsement of the kind of product that you're buying from companies that have not been legacy OEMs of the past. There are several. In India, you'd be surprised to know there are 72 new EV startups, out of which 44 I supply to. And the volumes are very, very small. And none of you have heard those names, and yet they're selling. So many of them are using their partners to say, you know what, this particular component comes from Bosch. I'm giving an example, sir. So if you say Bosch, that means it's of a certain category. It comes from Continental. It comes from a Denso. So similarly, there is much more endorsement of component companies who are doing a lot of work from the base up in the area of research, technology, and building up their own branding as a path that goes into a vehicle.
Hi, my name is Anjan. I represent a company called Green Design. We're into EV tech space from Bangalore. The question goes to Martin. Martin, what's your take on battery swapping, especially from a luxury car point of view, and generally your opinion on battery swapping trends?
I personally think in the car four-wheeler industry, it will be difficult to implement at a larger scale. The complexities of creating a safe vehicle, to have it compact, the whole structure of a vehicle on a car level is not in favor of battery swapping technologies. If I see how it's implemented on our side, it's deep integrated into the structure of the vehicle, and it would be difficult to get the same optimized product with a swapping technology. I'm not competent enough to speak about other elements of the industry, but I can see it's probably easier when you come to two-wheelers or three-wheelers. But on the four-wheeler industry, I personally don't think this is the strategy.
There's one question from the corner, please.
Hello.
Yeah. We can hear you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I'm Manoj Negi from T Connectivity. My question is to Mr. Jayant Davar. It's regarding the architectural change in the ICE engine. So what we are seeing that from domain to zonal and then we will be moving to the central architecture, where we are thinking of reducing the number of ECUs. So how do you think that how tier ones have been aligned with that. Because, for example, if we will have one ECU for an ABS and an airbag, then who would take the responsibility? Because there are different manufacturers for different systems in the car. So what do you think about that?
It's not easy. It's not an easy question. It's a tough question. We as a company make smart locks. And initially, we had to use the microprocessors that were being supplied by Continental. And Continental said, mine is the most important part. Therefore, I will lead this discussion with the OEM. You only do mechanical parts. But I said, we are the traditional lock makers. So it's a question of who can sway the sword. Effectively, people will have to kind of work together to carry this agenda forward. There is no other way. You have to remember that in the EVs that we are all talking about, in the case of two-wheelers, more than 50% is battery cost. And if you were to add all the other things, it adds up to 75% of the cost of that vehicle. So what is the OEM typically doing is assembling those. And they will have to depend on collaborative efforts by suppliers themselves. And that's the reason why we said it's important for component suppliers to form their own collaborative methodologies to carry the agenda forward. I think somewhere this will evolve into how these partnerships will go, but they will have to. Sometimes they might be forced by the OEMs. But you have to remember, like I said, if there are 77 EV players, believe me, when I tell you that out of the component industry, in terms of sheer size, the component industry, individual players will be much larger than most of them. So I think the power dynamics is going to change, and it will evolve. I don't have a simple answer today as to who will take that course or who will take command or the lead for that supply chain.
One quick question, if there's one from this side of the room. Yeah, keep it brief. And
Udit Baga. So we are automobile dealers for Maruti, Bajaj, and two-wheelers and Hyundai. So basically, I want to understand, this question goes to Martin. Like for the EV infrastructure, we all are doing a wait and, like you said, your driver is doing a wait and watch policy. I think the manufacturers are also doing the same. Like who's going to build the infrastructure? Like Tesla did it in the US, there was no infrastructure, they built their superchargers and did everything. And so other automobile OEMs, they are also planning to do the same. Plus everybody is fragmented. Somebody's having a different knob on the charger, somebody's having different knob, it's not working together. Or creating a consolidated infrastructure, like even like the cellular players, they combine their towers to make a portal. So I think so something needs to be done, like a disruption in that, to bring forth the EV. I think everybody is working individually, so it has to be a combined effort. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, you're right. The infrastructure is one of the essential elements that we need to drive forward and move on. Let me maybe start with what OEMs can do or cannot do. Yeah, I think, and that's to a large extent also based on my experience here in India. I think for an OEM, it's extremely important to provide a solution that customers can charge at home. I think that's the first step we need to take. We have done that with wall boxes, for example, and I think that is very essential because even that is not so simple. I think personally, building codes and the approaches of having ways to charge at home also, I mean, in the luxury segment, it's maybe a little bit easier because people have not only the means but also the space and the electric connectivity. But I think a big push is needed from building codes to implementation actually in apartment buildings and in societies to find approaches there. And that is also a very fragmented and difficult work to implement. Whatever can be done on that will help massively because we will see a trend in the industry which will also bring cars with a longer range. And at least in premium and luxury segment, range won't be a problem. Meaning, when we talk about our EQS, we talk about ranges about 750 kilometers. So that will be far more than most customers will need in many times. But also in smaller segments, you come to 200, 300, 400 kilometers. So at the end, your core infrastructure need is charging at home. When it comes then to charging across a country, I think most manufacturers will not be in a position to provide a strong charger infrastructure just because of size. I mean, we would not, I did ask my team to calculate for me how many cars would come across if I put something, say, between Delhi and Chandigarh. How many cars would come across and how many years will it take to, we're technically not able to create any case for the one or odd car which will come from our brand. So of course it might look differently for Suzuki, but still into infrastructure, I think there the Tatas and others are better positioned to do that, I personally believe. So, but again, it goes back to regulation and support and pushing into the infrastructure itself. So I cannot give you a conclusive answer, but my personal view is, okay, one topic I forgot, the fragmentation can to some extent also be resolved by when we talk about, say, integrating levels. Yeah, you will have more and more apps and providers who are able to guide you where infrastructure is available, being charging stations are available. So that will also further develop in that field. So it is complicated, it's a growing field, and I don't think anyone has conclusive answers. Mine is relatively clear. Let's get the home charging up as much as we can, and then we see how that will work.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you very much for the questions. And the timer shows that we have overshot the time budgeted for this session. That's, by the way, also a reflection of the strong interest level on the topic of technology megatrends in the automotive industry, mobility industry, and how it's going to evolve in the coming years. So this is a good indication that we have more questions, both from your side and I also as a moderator, than what the time could accommodate. But nonetheless, it was a packed and insightful session for sure. But thank you so much, esteemed panelists, for sparing your time, and to the wonderful audience for your queries and for your attendance. Thank you very much. And now I hand over to my colleague.